A long time ago, in a small village by the river called Uwonta, there was a forest called Ohianijenti, the forest that listened. People say the forest was alive. It didn't live the way people or animals do. It simply watched and listened. The trees were twisted like they were hiding something. The wind never stopped blowing. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you'd hear it saying things, small things, things that sounded like secrets. Nobody went near that forest, not the farmers, not the hunters. Even birds didn't fly over it. The forest just sat there year after year, waiting. But every 6 years, when the sky turned grey and the fog became thick like smoke, something strange will happen. The sea would pull back, just enough to show the beach. And there, one beautiful morning, a message was written clearly in the wet sand. Send your most dishonest or your most brave. Nobody ever saw who wrote it. Nobody ever caught it being formed, but everybody understood what it meant. A debt had to be paid. The people gathered by the river early that morning. They stood in silence, some shaking, some praying. Mothers held their children tight. Old men spat on the ground and whispered old prayers that hadn't been used in years, because they remembered the last time they had sent a strong warrior, a knight full of pride, covered in shining armor. He came back 3 days later, alive, but not normal. His eyes looked empty. His tongue was gone. He never spoke again, just sat there staring into space, shaking like someone hearing things nobody else could. This time, after the villagers saw the message written at the riverside, they just stared at the ground, hoping someone else would speak first. Then, a few of them rushed to the king's palace to report what they had seen. The king listened quietly. He didn't ask questions. He leaned back in his chair, waved his high fly whisk slowly, and said calmly, "Call Elai." Elai was a kind man who could sell you your own wrapper and leave you thanking him for the discount. His smile, too clean. His voice, too smooth. If he told you the sky was purple, you'd believe him and still step outside to double check. That's how deep his lies could go. His real name was Nkemdi, but the village stopped calling him that a long time ago. They called him Elai because he lied so much it became his name. They called him a merchant, but really, he was just a well-dressed liar. He sold cure-all powders that cured nothing, cloaks that made you invisible if you close your eyes and believe in foolishness, charms for love, beauty, success, all fake, but wrapped in just enough confidence to fool those desperate enough to hope. Back at the palace, Elai arrived with his usual flair, bowed just enough to be respectful, smiled just enough to annoy. "You sent for me, your majesty." King didn't blink. He just went straight to the point. "You will go to Ohianijenti." Eli's eyes narrowed for half a second, but then the smile came back. "That old forest," he said. "Ah, a new client." He turned, waiting for a reply, and walked out of the palace, grinning to himself, already thinking about what kind of show he'll put up for the forest. He walked fast, not out of fear, but excitement. The way some men prepare for battle, Elai prepared for performance. By the time he got back to his shop, the sun was already low in the sky. He packed his bag quickly, a raffia bag filled with nonsense, powders, mirrors, beads, and a broken compass that never pointed north. All useless, but it made him feel ready. His wife, Amaka, leaned on the doorway. She had seen too much to be impressed. "You're going to that forest?" Elai tied his bag. "You heard the king." You don't think twice? I've lied my way out of wars. She looked at him, no smile, no softness. Elai, she said. The forest listens. At sunset, he stood at the river bank. A boat waited, tied to an old tree. The water was calm, too calm. That was the first lie. He stepped in without hesitation. The fog followed quickly, swallowing everything behind him. And ahead, the forest waited. Ohianegensi doesn't welcome people like a normal place would. No birds flew above it, no leaves rustled softly in greeting, no sweet scent of flower. There was no sign of life. Elai's boat hit the muddy bank with a dull thud, like even the water was tired of carrying him. Mist wrapped around the trees like soaked clothes. The trees themselves looked wild, twisted, confused as they had grown in fear. Some bent forward like they were trying to hear him better. Elai stepped out of the boat with a smile that was already starting to crack. Well, he muttered, at least the land is cheap. Nobody laughed, not even the forest. He began walking slowly, carefully. His feet crushed dry leaves and old bones. Some didn't even look fully like animals. The forest didn't offer a path. It simply allowed him to move forward. The ground shifted just enough to let him pass, as if it had made up its mind about him already. The deeper he went, the heavier the air became. Not colder, not warmer, just watching. Then the voices began. At first, it sounded like wind, but then it came again. He said it would help. He stopped. The voice came from behind his ear. He turned, but there was nothing there. And then again, another voice came on. You promised me. Elai held onto his bag tighter and walked faster. The forest didn't speak in full sentences. It didn't have to. It just showed him. The trees started to move, not shaking, but shaping, coiling into figures. One bent into a little girl holding a small bottle, the same kind he used to sell to sick people, claiming it was a cure. Another twisted into a man with hollow eyes, holding a bag of coins, his mouth stretched in a silent scream. A third looked like a hunched woman, his mother, maybe. He didn't stay long enough to be sure. More whispers followed, dozens of voices, some angry, some sad, all disappointed. You said it was real? You lied to me. The voice thundered again. Elai forced a weak laugh. All right, he said, lifting both hands. I get it. Bad merchants, big lies. I've heard worse at the king's court. But then something changed. Something left him. He didn't feel pain, just a strange lightness in his chest. He looked around and realized his shadow was gone. Not faded, not dimmed, just missing. He stood still, his heart now racing. Okay, he whispered, that's new. Then, by habit, he said, I'm not scared. That was another lie. He turned to look at the water beside him, but there was no reflection. The forest wasn't punishing him with pain. It was removing him, one lie at a time. His voice grew thinner. His echo stopped following. Even the face of a woman he loved, gone, like he had been erased. And still, he kept walking, not because he was brave, but because there was nowhere else to go. By nightfall, Ohianegensi had stopped feeling like a forest. It felt like a mirror. Every step Elai took, the forest showed him something. Not just his past, but his thoughts, his excuses, his worst intentions, were hidden in shapes of branches, and the way trees leaned towards him, and the quiet that followed each word he spoke. And he kept talking like a man trying not to disappear. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he muttered. "Elai." And just like that, his voice cracked. No pain, no fire, just silence. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. He touched his throat. Everything seemed normal, but when he tried to speak, not even a whisper escaped. The forest wasn't angry, it was hungry, and every lie he told fed it. He sat down under a crooked tree and stared ahead. In front of him was a still pool of water, dark and silent. Elai leaned over it, expecting to see his face, but what looked back was younger. It wasn't a trick or a dream, it was him as a boy. The reflection blinked once, then it spoke. "You remember what you told her?" Eli's chest tightened. He couldn't answer, he couldn't speak at all. The reflection didn't wait. "You said you would come back. You said she would be safe." His lips shook. A name came to his mind, one he hadn't said in years. Dinma. The forest let him say it, one word. That was enough. And then the memory rushed in all at once. He remembered the fire, hot, wild, alive. He remembered the screams. His sister, Dinma, was trapped inside the house as the flames climbed higher, swallowing everything. And he remembered himself turning away, not to call for help, not to try and save her, but to save himself. He ran, not out of confusion or fear, but out of pure survival, and he never looked back, nor told anyone about it. He simply buried it under years of lies. But Ohianeginti remembered. The boy in the water stared at him, waiting, and finally, Elai spoke the one thing he never had. "I ran." His voice trembled, but it came out clear. "I left her. I lied to everyone, but the worst part, I lied to myself." Everything went still. No whispers, no moving branches, even the wind stopped. The forest had heard what he came for. The pool rippled, the boy's reflection faded, and for the first time since he arrived, there was silence. Not the haunted kind, the real kind. Ohianeginti had taken what he needed, and it was satisfied. Morning came slowly to Ohianeginti, as if the sun wasn't sure he wanted to see what was left behind. Elai stood at the edge of the river, barefoot. His wrapper was loose and dusty. His skin was damp with mist. He didn't remember the walk, only that he had come out of the forest. His raffia bag was gone. So were the charms, mirrors, powders, and every tool he once used to trick people into believing he had power. He didn't feel free. He didn't feel cleansed. He felt emptied. His voice was back, but it didn't sound like him anymore. It was dry and uneven, like something that had been borrowed, broken, and returned with a crack in it. A small canoe waited at the bank, tied to the same crooked tree where he had left it. Elai stepped in without hesitation. The river, which hadn't moved since he arrived, now carried him gently away. No fog, no whispers, no resistance. He didn't look back, but if he had, he would have seen the forest already fading behind him, swallowed by mist, like he was never there. He reached Ugunta just before sunrise. There was no drums, no elders, no welcome, only Amaka standing on the same dock where she had watched him leave. She had come there every morning since he left, not because she believed in magic, but because deep down she didn't know how to stop hoping. This morning she saw him, and immediately she ran towards him. Her bare feet hit the wooden dock fast. extremely excited to see him again after losing hope. She got to where he was standing and hugged him tightly. Then she loses her grip and started examining him like someone checking to make sure he was real. She stared at his face, touched his arm, her eyes filled with tears. "You're back," she said, voice breaking. Elai couldn't hold her gaze for long. "I am," he replied softly, "but I don't know if I'm still the same man who left." She shook her head. "You're not. You look tired, like something is missing." He nodded. "It is. A lot is." For a moment, they stood in silence in each other's grip, with tears rolling freely from their cheek. Everything stood still, and the river behind him, the village behind her, both changed. Then he said it. "I'm sorry." Amaka looked at him, unsure. "For what?" she asked. "For everything," Elai said. "For the lies and for the pretense." She blinked, tears still resting on her cheeks. "I didn't know if you'd come back. I didn't know if I should," he whispered. "But I am here, and for the first time in my life, I mean every word I've said so far." They turned and began walking home, slowly, quietly, side by side. Elai leaned heavily on her. His steps were unsteady. His body was too weak from what he'd lost inside Ohianigensi. She didn't ask further questions. She just held him as they walked back home. The early risers, the hunters, the palm wine tappers, the fishermen saw them first and they paused. Not out of fear, but because something about Elai felt different. Not cursed, not holy, just changed. Word spread before they reached their compound. "Elai is back. Elai has returned." Elai is quiet. Even the king heard, but he didn't summon him. Some things don't need reports. Deep down in his heart, he was glad that Elai made it back home alive. Elai didn't speak to anyone else that day, but when Amaka asked, he answered, "What happened in the forest? What did you see? Do you remember anything?" He answered all of her questions in truth, calm, clear, and direct. The weeks that followed, Elai didn't speak unless someone else asked. And when he did, he told the truth, always, without thinking. He didn't laugh, he didn't lie, he didn't sell anything. People came to his door, some out of curiosity, others with questions. They asked what happened in the forest. He answered. They asked if he was real. He said yes. They asked what he saw. He told them quietly, as each word cost him something, and soon word spread. Not about what he said, but about how he said it. People noticed he didn't lie, not even the tiniest one, to make someone feel better. At first, they respected it, then they feared it. Because truth is only welcomed when it's convenient. Some believed Ohianigensi had cursed him. Some said he'd been chosen. A few whispered he was no longer fully human, that the forest had left something behind inside him. He didn't argue, he didn't explain. He simply lived, quiet, honest, unshaken. Years passed, and when Elai finally died, it was like everything else he did, quiet, strange, and heavy. They buried him behind his home under the udala tree, and in his pockets they found one thing: a small, smooth black stone. Faint white letters were carved into it. No one could read them, but if you held it up to your ear and listened closely, the wind would whisper something you weren't ready to hear. They say Ohianigensi still waits on the far side of the river, covered in mist, listening. And every few years, when the fog comes early and the water pulls back, the same message appears in the sun, but this time not as a threat nor a warning, just a question: tell me the truth.